Operation Crossroads Baker. A 21-kiloton underwater detonation that forever changed naval warfare doctrine. On the 25th of July, 1946, at precisely 0835 hours local time, the United States military conducted the world's first underwater nuclear test at Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. The device, suspended 90 feet beneath the surface in the heart of a 73-vessel target fleet, detonated with devastating efficiency. Unlike its predecessor, Able, which airburst with limited effect 2 weeks earlier, Baker unleashed forces never before witnessed. Within milliseconds, a massive dome of irradiated seawater, nearly half a mile wide and several hundred feet tall, erupted from the lagoon. 8 capital ships, including the USS Arkansas battleship, were immediately engulfed. The pressure wave crushed hulls, while the superheated water column vaporized everything near ground zero. What made Baker truly significant wasn't just its destructive power, but the invisible killer it introduced. Radioactive contamination rendered salvage operations nearly impossible. Ships that appeared undamaged became radioactive tombs, their hulls so saturated with nuclear fallout that decontamination efforts proved futile. The USS New York, a veteran warship that had survived 2 world wars, had to be scuttled due to impossible radiation levels. The naval personnel tasked with post-test inspections received dangerous radiation doses despite precautions. The iconic images from Baker, showing that massive mushroom cloud rising from the sea, became emblematic of the atomic age. More critically, the test demonstrated that underwater nuclear detonations represented a strategic capability far more complex than airburst weapons, one that could neutralize entire naval formations through both immediate destruction and persistent radiological denial. Castle Bravo. The largest thermonuclear device ever detonated by the United States and one of the most significant miscalculations in military history. On the 1st of March 1954, at 6:45 a.m. in the crystal-clear waters of Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands, a 10,700-kilogram weapon based on the Teller-Ulam design was detonated. Designed to release 6 megatons of energy, the device generated a catastrophic yield of 15 megatons, 2.5 times what was predicted. The miscalculation? Scientists did not correctly anticipate the reaction of the lithium-7 isotope in nuclear fusion. The explosion created a fireball, 4.5 kilometers in diameter, and a mushroom cloud that reached 40 kilometers in height and 100 kilometers in width in just 10 minutes. The resulting crater was 2 kilometers in diameter and 76 meters deep. Radiation was detected in Australia, India, Japan, and parts of the United States and Europe. The incident contaminated the crew of the Japanese fishing boat Lucky Dragon, causing the death of 1 crew member and radiation sickness in 23 others. It also forced the evacuation of island inhabitants within a 480-kilometer radius. The consequences of Castle Bravo went beyond immediate physical damage. The event triggered a diplomatic crisis with Japan, intensified worldwide protests against nuclear testing, and led to the implementation of the first radioactive fallout monitoring system. In my field experience, I've rarely seen a single event so drastically change operational protocols. Castle Bravo wasn't just an unprecedented demonstration of destructive power, but also a turning point that forced military powers to recognize that, in the nuclear age, even miscalculations have global consequences. Starfish Prime. One of the most extraordinary nuclear tests ever conducted by humanity. On the 9th of July 1962, at the height of the Cold War, the United States detonated a hydrogen bomb 400 kilometers above the Pacific Ocean. Part of Operation Fishbowl, this 1.4 megaton explosion was designed to test the effects of nuclear weapons in the space environment. During my 25 years in the Marine Corps, We studied this event as a watershed moment in modern military strategy. The detonation created an electromagnetic pulse that traveled thousands of kilometers, shutting down about 300 streetlights in Hawaii, nearly 1,500 kilometers away. The most impressive phenomenon was the visual spectacle, an artificial aurora that transformed the Pacific night sky into a kaleidoscope of red and green colors visible even in Honolulu. Witnesses described the sky as if it were in flames. The explosion also seriously damaged at least 6 orbiting satellites, including the first commercial telecommunications satellite, Telstar, which failed prematurely due to intensified radiation in the Van Allen belts. What few know is that Soviet scientists conducted similar tests called Operation K, but none with the magnitude or documented consequences of Starfish Prime. This test taught us about the vulnerability of modern electronic systems to electromagnetic pulses and significantly shaped nuclear defense doctrines. Decades later, we still study its consequences to prepare our critical infrastructure against similar threats. Starfish Prime, the day man touched space with nuclear fire. Soviet RDS-1, codenamed Joe, won by the Americans. The 29th of August 1949, the day that forever changed the global balance of power. The American nuclear monopoly came to an end when the Soviet Union detonated its first nuclear weapon at the Semipalatinsk test site in Kazakhstan. This 22-kiloton device, equivalent to 22,000 tons of TNT, fundamentally replicated the design of the American Fat Man plutonium bomb. The operation, conducted under maximum secrecy, was led by physicist Igor Kurchatov, whom the Soviets respectfully called Beard due to his characteristic black beard. The RDS-1 utilized a 6.2 kilogram plutonium-239 core, compressed by conventional explosives in a spherical implosion arrangement of 32 explosive lenses. American intelligence was completely surprised, initially estimating that the Soviets would only achieve such a feat by 1953. What Washington didn't know was the extent of the Soviet espionage network, including Klaus Fuchs, who had transmitted critical details from the Manhattan Project. The radioactive cloud, detected by American Air Force WB-29 reconnaissance aircraft, reached 9,800 meters in height, with the shock wave being felt kilometers away. The success of the test drastically accelerated the arms race, forcing Truman to authorize the development of the hydrogen bomb and marking the true beginning of the MAD doctrine, mutually assured destruction. In the next 8 years, the Soviet arsenal would grow to 600 warheads. The contaminated sites near the test zone still register above normal radiation levels today, a silent reminder of the first Soviet nuclear response that transformed a world with one nuclear superpower into one perpetually on the brink of total annihilation. Operation Plumbbob. The nuclear series that forever changed our understanding of atomic power and its limits. Conducted in 1,957 inches the Nevada desert, Plumbbob remains the most extensive, longest, and most controversial nuclear operation ever carried out on American continental soil. For 129 days, the American Military Command detonated 29 distinct nuclear devices, plus one safety experiment, totaling a destructive power of 58.3 megatons, the equivalent of nearly 4,000 Hiroshima bombs. No test perimeter has ever witnessed such concentrated devastation. During Plumbbob, approximately 16,000 military personnel were strategically positioned in the testing field, many just a few kilometers from ground zero, testing not only equipment but the human response itself to radiation and shock waves. The operation conducted an unprecedented experiment, the first and only man technically launched into space. During the Grapple test, a 1-ton steel plate was propelled at speeds estimated at 66 times the speed of sound, completely disappearing from radar. Subsequent calculations indicate it likely escaped Earth's atmosphere. The John test, within the operation, was responsible for the highest level of atmospheric contamination recorded until then, with the radiation column reaching 21,000 meters in altitude. Today, we know that Plumbbob was responsible for exposing thousands of civilians in adjacent areas to dangerous levels of radiation, later associated with a significant increase in cancer and leukemia cases in the region. The most controversial test of all redefined our nuclear safety policies, but at what cost? Operation Grapple. The ambitious British project that shifted the global power balance. Initiated in May 1957, this series of nuclear tests represented the United Kingdom's determination to develop its own hydrogen bomb, independent of the Americans. Following the Suez Crisis in 1956, when the U.S. denied military support to the UK, the British accelerated their nuclear program to maintain strategic relevance. 9 detonations were carried out in 3 distinct series on the remote Malden and Christmas Islands in the Pacific Ocean. The operation involved more than 20,000 military personnel and civilians in an impressive display of military logistics. The Grapple X test, on the 8th of November 1957, marked the first real success, with a detonation of 1.8 megatons, 120 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. The pinnacle came with Grapple Y in April 1958, when the British detonated a 3-megaton device, exceeding their own technical expectations. The radioactive cloud reached 40 kilometers high and was visible from over 700 kilometers away. With this series of tests, the United Kingdom became the world's 3rd thermonuclear power, after the USA and USSR. Interestingly, British scientists developed a unique, compact design that allowed the devices to be carried by V-bombers, unlike the enormous American bombs of the era. Operation Grapple represented the last major effort to maintain superpower status for a declining empire, but its legacy endured, securing Great Britain a permanent seat at the table of global nuclear powers to this day. Gerboise Bleue. France's first nuclear test, conducted on the 13th of February 1960 in the Algerian Sahara Desert, a detonation that immediately catapulted France into the exclusive club of nuclear powers. The device, with its plutonium implosion design, produced a 70-kiloton explosion, nearly 5 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb and significantly exceeding the expectations of French engineers themselves. The test received the code name Gerboise Bleue, Blue Gerboa in English, referencing the small desert rodent and the color of the French flag. This event marked the pinnacle of the force de frappe policy, the independent strike force envisioned by President Charles de Gaulle, who sought to ensure French military autonomy in a bipolar world dominated by the US and USSR. The detonation occurred 100 meters above ground, creating a mushroom cloud visible for hundreds of kilometers. Gerboise Bleue's success represented more than a technological demonstration, USA, geopolitical statement, positioning France as the 4th member of the nuclear club after the US, USSR, and United Kingdom. The French would conduct 3 more tests in the Gerboise series, white, red, and green, completing the national colors. Gerboise Bleue's legacy remains controversial, with estimates of radioactive contamination affecting local Saharan populations for decades, and over 150,000 civilians and military personnel exposed to radiation during France's 17 years of nuclear testing in the region. This singular test shifted the Cold War balance of power and established the foundations of France's current nuclear deterrent, which to this day maintains one of the world's most advanced nuclear arsenals. Sedan Test. The 6th of July, 1962, the day America decided to test whether nuclear bombs could become the excavators of the future. It seems absurd today, but this was the essence of Project Plowshare, turning swords into plowshares, or in this case, warheads into civil construction tools. I was just beginning my military career when I heard the reports. The device was 104 kilotons, approximately 7 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb, buried 194 meters deep in the Nevada desert. When detonated, the Earth simply rose. 12 million tons of desert were displaced in seconds, creating a crater 390 meters in diameter and 98 meters deep. Think about it. A cavity the size of 3 American football fields, as deep as a 30-story building, formed in an instant. Scientists called this peaceful nuclear excavation. They were convinced they could use these explosions to create instant harbors, canals, mountain passages. The Panama Canal of the future would be excavated with dozens of these detonations in sequence. But there was a critical problem that enthusiasts downplayed: radiation. Despite being underground, Sedan released approximately 7% of its radioactive material into the atmosphere, creating a cloud that traveled across the country and was detected as far as Canada and the North Atlantic. The Sedan crater remains to this day, visited by thousands of tourists annually, a monument to Cold War thinking preserved in the National Register of Historic Places, a concrete reminder of when we believed we could harness the atom to move mountains, literally. In the next episode, Operation Argus. The most secretive nuclear test series ever conducted by the United States, and the first to occur in space. In August 1958, while the world was distracted by other Cold War tensions, the American Navy positioned the aircraft carrier USS Norton Sound in the middle of the South Atlantic, in an operation classified as top secret.